I am Nick.
I'm Sasha.
And this has been the Chaos Twins.
What's up?
I'm trying my spinny chair out. Spin.
Nick,
It's
we're
spin.
on. It's happening
What?
now. Now is the time. We're here. The people are here. And
No, it's
yeah.
not. No, I don't believe you.
Turn on.
I don't think
Turn
so.
on. All right. Well,
Nope.
while Nick has short-circuited.
No, it's
Welcome
great.
to
I'm
the
here.
Chaos Twins, everybody.
We're back. We're here. Sasha, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing pretty all right. I'm really enjoying the warmer weather. I'm enjoying the longer days. How about you?
I'm good. I'm in a hotel for this episode, because why not?
Did she finally do it? She finally kicked you out. She said, enough with the bits.
Can I tell you what the problem is? I don't like that you know me so well that you understand that when my wife divorces me, it will be because of my bits.
Yeah, it won't be for anything. Like, there'll be no affairs. There'll be no lies.
No affairs.
It'll be the
it's
nonsense.
Just the bits. It's
like,
Nick.
I've told you for the last time that joke is not funny.
I'm a grown person, and I'm done. I'm done here. It's time to move. Yeah, no, that's precisely. No. It's just we trying out different locations. And so I decided to come to a random hotel in LA, chill out. No, just traveling around as we're not supposed to do during COVID because.
Well, you're vaccinated. You are a vaccinated individual.
I am, in fact, a vaccinated individual.
I think the CDC says that yes, you can.
Yes, you can.
Travel.
Should you? That's the question, right? And you try to keep it limited. But travel.
I think you've been quite safe, Nick. We'll get it. We can talk about COVID for a long time. We have a great show today. We're very excited about it. We're excited about our guest. We're excited for friends of friends to join us and have a little bit of chaos. But first, let's secure the perimeter. Let's just make sure everybody's safe.
Secure the perimeter. Secure the perimeter.
I really
the intro video is not secure.
It's nothing about anything we do is secure.
It shouldn't
nothing.
Be. But in the effort of, what have you done this week to secure your perimeter?
I will tell you. I'll tell you what I did. I absolutely protected my joy this week. I had a good meeting yesterday, and it went much better than I thought it did. And then I had some not great stuff happen. And after that, I was like, you know what? I need to just go out and chill with some friends and safely outdoors. We just got some drinks, and it was nice. I had, it's my first time hanging with people in this pandemic. But it was just nice to see people and to be like, oh yeah, it's okay to feel joy. And we were all vaccinated, so that was nice. Just protecting happiness. It felt good to protect happiness for a minute. How about you? What'd you do to secure your perimeter?
I will say a very big thing is I got my second COVID shot. I got my second vaccine, and I was like, it's also, there's a lot of conversation, I'll call it, around this vaccine and people getting it or having access to it or, having reasons for maybe being not so excited to go get someone put something in their arm. But I will say, just for me personally, I was not expecting just the haha of that's it. I got the second shot and we are here now. It's insane to me that a year ago, we barely knew what this was, and now people are being vaccinated against it. But very exciting. Hoping that this means, easier times traveling, easier times being with family and friends. And then I was I traveled home, and my parents had some of their older friends over for the first time in forever, and just the giddiness of truly senior citizens, like love you mom, love you dad, but like these 60 plus individuals, like the giddiness of being able to be with each other is really lovely just to see. So the secure perimeter is actually the ability to actually let people into your home and not fear the worst.
Not fear.
And there were losses within that group. Family had been affected, you know, husbands, spouses lost because of COVID. So just it was not lost on me, the significance of having everyone together. So it was really nice.
That's, you know what? I'm not even going to joke. That sounds like a very secure perimeter. That's an awesomely secure perimeter. Unlike the video that introduces this segment, that sounds nice. The video is not in any way, and we have Brittany. I know Beyonce Britt in the studio there. We gotta look at that. We gotta look at that video because good.
I think she nailed it.
I think I feel unsafe every time it plays. So
exactly, she nailed it.
Nice. Weird. Should we go to our tag 'em?
I love it.
Let's go to tag 'em. Let's tag people out. Let's get it. Yeah. Let's get it going. Tag them. Tag someone who's doing the work, activism, community service, arts in action, and or otherwise, who is making their corner of the world a better place.
Now, Nick, I'm going to let you do this one because this one was really important to you.
It's super important. Guys, we are blessed to have a press secretary, right, who is legendary, who is really, really good at her job.
Yeah, if we can just throw up a photo.
Throw up a picture of her. Yeah,
throw up a Oh, wait.
Oh, no. Wait.
Oh, God. That's
Allison
not Jen Psaki.
That's crazy.
Psaki.
That's not who it is. That's just, I can't
tell. Which, oh, God. Oh,
who is it? Which one of them is it? It's crazy. That's Jen Psaki. There's Jen Psaki.
Nailed it. Landed on it, finally.
We got it, guys. We're in. No, we obviously love the West Wing on this program. It's the only form of government that works consistently. It's a fictional one, and even they. But no, Jen Psaki. I wanted to tag Jen Psaki this week because it's really been fascinating. It's really been fascinating watching someone who. You know, I'm not going to say the Biden administration is perfect. I'm not going to say that they, you know, are doing everything they need to be doing all the time at any point. But what I will say is her as a press secretary, as someone who is shaping the message of the administration, she comes in with facts and she comes in with hard nose. She comes in with like, this is what it is. And this is what we told you that it is. Yeah. And you asking this question again is doing nothing in the way of, you know, getting me to give you something I didn't already give you.
It's like when you ask your mom for like, you're like, can we go to McDonald's? And she's like, no. And you're like, but if it's on the way though. And she's accurate. Like, no. And you're like, but if it's just this once, like to this week, and then tomorrow we have broccoli. And she's like, it doesn't matter how you ask the question or which way you try to get down the street. Like the answer is no. This is we're going home. The answer is we have food in the fridge.
Accurate. We've already touched base on this. You actually already know the answer to this question.
The answer is, do you have McDonald's money? The answer is there's food in the fridge.
There's food in the fridge. I already made it. It's not going to happen. And that's Jen Psaki here is you know reigning in our allowance as Americans. But it's really just great. I love her pushing for the truth and pushing for facts and pushing for like. We deal with what is in front of us and not what's behind us and not what you think is in front of us and not even what you think is coming up or want to report on is coming up because that shit's not helpful. Yeah. It's actually not helpful to anybody to be dealing with anything other than what is in front of us right now. So
would you say though that she has secured the perimeter of her podium?
Yeah, it's super. Can we throw that Jen Psaki picture up again, please? Yep.
There it is.
That feels super secure to me. And,
that's a really secure podium. You remember that? You remember that SNL sketch where like I think it was Melissa McCarthy and she was like it was like on wheels, like the press podium thing like took off running. Like who was she like?
Yes. Was she Sean Spicer?
She was Sean Spicer. It's like such a different. Like, that podium's not going anywhere.
It's present. It is present. The podium is present.
Oh, nice, Mara.
Come on, register to vote. We love that.
Yes.
We love to see it. We love to see you register to vote.
Oh my gosh, was that your first time registering? Oh no, that's very exciting. Everyone should, that's a perimeter you must secure at all times. Like you cannot approach an election assuming that you are already registered. And depending on where you live, you might not be anymore.
You might no longer be. You may no longer be.
Yeah, congratulations, Mara. That's really exciting.
Wow,
all right. Let's get into it. I'm going to intro our guest this week. Is David Johns. He is the executive director of the National Black Justice Coalition. Previously, in 2013, he was appointed as the first executive director of the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans by President Barack Hussein Obama, and served until the last day of the Obama administration in January 2017. I remember that day well. And David is currently pursuing his PhD in sociology and education at Columbia University. He's only slightly busy. Welcome, our guest.
Just a little bit.
Hello.
Just vibrance. That's right.
It's so lovely to have you here. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the invitation.
I love your photos, everything. I'm so excited to get into this. Education is it's such a soft spot for me, or just it's just something that I love to get into. But I think that that's probably true for a lot of people. And I definitely know that it's true within the Black community because of what education enables and allows us to do. And sort of the fact that, some of the first jobs our mothers were able to get were teachers. And that's just such a part of our culture. But where I want to start, however, is that you work a lot in policy. And I think you work a lot with language and words. And from reading up on the way that you talk about your work, you talk about the importance of language and words. And I think that and how that goes into policy. But for those who might not know, which may or may not also be me a little bit, I think I know what policy is, but sometimes I'm oh, it's murky. The definition is murky for me. So can you Schoolhouse Rock style, I'm just a bill sitting on Capitol Hill. This is how a bill becomes a law. Can you explain to us what policy is and how it comes to affect my everyday life or someone's everyday life?
I actually can, in part because I am updating my curriculum because I'm going to teach a policy process course at American University this summer.
Amazing.
So I should definitely be able to do this.
Yes, I can.
Here are references. Yep, here are references for people to follow.
The proof that I know.
So the first is his book by John Kingdon, Agendas, Alternatives, and Policies. And then the second is his book by George Lakoff called Don't Think of an Elephant. I'll start with this one because when I say don't think of an elephant, what do you think about?
An elephant.
Elephants.
Definitely.
Right.
A Republican.
So secondarily, right, in that order. Yeah. And that's really important because policies are ideas, really hopes, expectations, frameworks within which we want people to think about certain things, administer agencies or operate programs or otherwise established parameters that are codified by law. And so it's an idea. So it's the thing on Capitol Hill is the idea that goes through this process to become codified by law.
Okay.
Codification means that it's signed by someone who has authority over an agency or a department or a branch. Think about the White House. And once they sign it into law, there is then a process to support the communication and administration of whatever is written in that policy.
So is it what's your mission? What's your administration's mission? What's your vision statement? What's your what are your goals? Or would you describe it otherwise?
It can be, but it doesn't have to be that, right? So I think 2 points. One is there are policies that govern most aspects of our lived existence, right? That we stop at traffic lights is a policy. Somebody made the decision that there were going to be these things that in America have between 2 or 3 colors in them, that they will rotate every so often, and that we have to adhere to them. And if we don't, there are consequences to the policy, right? So that's one way to think about it. And then the second thing is that there are different policies at different levels for different reasons. So I taught kindergarten and 3rd grade, and there were policies, some of them unwritten, right? That parents dropped their kids off at the school at a certain time. And that to be a student, it meant that you were going to show up in a certain number of ways. You're going to dress in ways that are appropriate. You're going to sit in these places where we designate that it's appropriate for you to sit. You'll bring a lunch that adheres to these standards. What I taught it was that you couldn't bring chocolate. You couldn't bring anything good because everybody was allergic to everything, right? And there were some written policies around what I, as a teacher, would ensure that my students learned over the course of the time that they were with me or entrusted into my care. That there were going to be certain exams that would help to check that. And so the second point I want to make is that there are different policies at different levels, depending on what one is doing and how they're engaging with a system. And too often we think about policies governing negative actions or consequences, in particular, the prison industrial complex or the police. That goes back to what I mentioned with traffic lights. Traffic lights really matter because if you run one, you can get a ticket or go to jail, right? And the consequence can increase depending on the policy that's drafted in that area. I'm literally sitting in Washington, D.C., but I can look over the bridge into Virginia. And in D.C., reckless driving is a traffic offense. In Virginia, it's a misdemeanor, and it can be a felony depending on the speed, right? And so all of this is really about context. People craft policies for the specific needs of a community, of a state, or of a country.
Oh, yeah. Very clear.
I love that. I mean, and it's so interesting because I think that so much of what it seems your work is, right? I mean, and your current, for those of you who don't know, David's current PhD research focuses on how public high schools shape and form Black masculine identity. And this idea of policy and this idea of regulation and structure is intrinsic to high school life. So I guess my kind of follow-up to that would be, so what does your research look like? What are you, if you're telling me you're going into these high schools and looking at Black masculine identity, what are you finding? And also, what are you seeing as some of the most successful trends and methods towards dismantling a uniform idea of Black masculinity? Like, what are people doing that is helping to maybe kind of get in the structure and dismantle it a little bit and make room for everyone? Or are you finding any of that? I know it's kind of a big overarching question, but yeah.
No, and an important one. And at the risk of being persnickety, I want to push on something. So my current doctoral research focuses on how racism, homophobia, transphobia, and transmisogynoir, which uniquely impacts Black trans girls, shapes public schools. So it's a little bit more expansive than where you started, but I'm going to answer that question.
Please.
I think where you got the specific focus on Black male identity is where my master's thesis was. I wrote my master's thesis about, it was titled Shadowboxing. It was really about the experiences of the 5th grade students that were in the school where I was a classroom teacher. And it was about their acknowledgement of and responses to understandings of Black masculine identity, right? And there are 3 things that I think are important from that study and the work that we've done since that very much informs the work that I'm doing, but is really broader in trying to understand the experiences of students who are either at some point going to identify as members of the LGBTQIA+ community or who are believed to be members of the LGBTQIA+ community. I'll come back to that because there's a new term that I introduced. I don't identify as gay. I'll come back to that.
Yeah.
With regard to Black masculine identity and schools or community responses that are most appropriate, there is a first explicit acknowledgement that Black masculine identity is not a singular, monolithic, enveloping thing, that there always have been and will always be multiple versions of Black masculine identities, right? And so it's troubling what is often offered as a binary, where one is either a Black man and that looks a certain way, that's often shaped by time and context. And so I was actually doing a lot of work thinking about Judith and the Black Messiah and what it meant during the height of the Black Power movement for Black male identity to be shaped by religious institutions or the Nation of Islam and the type of dress that was celebrated at that time and the type of militancy that was expected of Black men, right, to show up in often major metropolitan spaces and in communities where they were responsible for other people. That image, which gets changed over time, right? It was the hip hop thug in the late 90s, right? Yeah. When I was growing up in Inglewood and people were focused on all of that. And often it's counter to what is seen as more effeminate versions of maleness, not even masculinity, but of maleness, right? And that's associated with Alvin Ailey, who created the Alvin Ailey Dance Company, or other performers, right? And so my point here is that it is most often the case that, at least in my embodiment of masculine identity, that there's a bit of all of that, right? I think about the ways in which Billy Porter is challenging and testing our expectations around gender performance, particularly with regard to clothing in this regard. I also think about the extreme amount of strength that one has to demonstrate to show up in the world being Black male and femme, or to be feminine and or gendered as a girl, when we think about how white, Eurocentric, US-based models of understanding people and things put us in these categories and then assign values to them. And so troubling these assumptions about what it means to be a boy or to be masculine or to be strong is central.
Yeah.
The second thing is that a lot of the schools that I see do a really thoughtful job about this are inviting young people to interrogate and to use the tools at their disposal to interrogate how these assumptions and tropes and pathologies have come into being. So I was really excited about some work that I did with a group of students in New Orleans 6 or 7 months before the world shut down because of the novel coronavirus. And they were literally deconstructing where myths came from, where like the fairy tale industrial complex and like what it means to be like the king of the jungle, right? And finding ways to complicate that with understandings of how it is that female lionesses in that context show up and demonstrate strength. And so giving them the tools so that they can be critical of the information that they are often forced to ingest and in the information that they're now creating, given the world that we live in and all that they have access to, is incredibly important. And then the third thing is that there are adults who are willing to take risks and to be incredibly uncomfortable and acknowledging that so much of what I'm talking about requires people to acknowledge that there's a whole lot that we don't know. And that's by design, right?
Yeah.
The last thing I'll say about this is that it has never been lost on me as an elementary school teacher that we teach science in ways that suggest that it's static and that it's fixed.
Right.
And science is the exact opposite, right? Like there are systems that don't exist anymore, right? Like people debate about whether or not planets are still planets. And in fact, the process of scientific discovery is one that necessitates critique and revisiting by other people in the field to test on theories. And we don't teach that to students. We don't teach them to engage in debate and to celebrate debate or to argue better. And the result of that is that we take the very base level knowledge that we're given, e.g., there are only two genders, or that it's only XX chromosome and XY chromosome, when in fact there are at least 4 other permutations that we know of. And we stifle often the creativity that exists when people are younger and their brains aren't sullied by the politics of respect or decorum. And it stifles their desire to want to like push further and ask more questions. And I'm saying all of this to say that in each of these environments, especially in schools, it requires adults to understand that there's a whole lot that we don't know. It's not our job to know everything simply because we can't. And if we allow ourselves to be enrolled in the process of helping young people figure out the world around them, that we all win while learning more together.
Yeah.
That you said about 50 incredible things in a very short amount of time. So thank you. But I mean, what I love about what you're saying is the emphasis on critical thought and the emphasis on being able to take a minute and listen and hear and process and choose and make and learn and grow. As you said, we live in an institution that by its very nature, that is exactly what takes it down. So the institution, it seems, will never, or I guess my question to you is, do you think we could ever get the institution to a place where it would support that? Or is that something that has to come from the bottom up?
When you say institution, are you referring to public schools in America or another institution?
America. America, the American, which is, I know is such a broad thing, but like critical thought does not, in general, is not, it's not helpful to keep a ruling class.
I think you could probably though, like, well, yeah. But if you could, like, looking at public education as, if we look at it as the cradle of like how we educate citizens to be citizens, like how to tell you how to be in the world, then you can look at that and say, like, does the structure of this educational system actually going to enable?
Yep. It's why I apply my skill set as a sociologist to schools.
Yeah.
Public schools are foundationally important. You cannot have a functional society without public schools, to do exactly what you just described, Sasha.
Yeah.
And specific to that, and I think more generally to your question, Nick, the answer is yes. That which has been doesn't always have to be. And all of this shit is by, I don't know, can I curse here?
Yes.
Okay. All of this shit is by design, right?
Yeah.
Like, these things have been created by people for a reason. So Black feminists refer to all of this, what allows our society to exist, as the matrix of domination. It's the sign, it's the symbols, it's the systems that allow white, cis, heteropatriarchy to be omnipresent, yet invisible, hyper invisible at the very same time. It is what enables the gaslighting that is us currently watching a murder trial for a murder that we all saw happen on tape. Right. It is what allows white supremacists, insurrectionists to storm our Capitol and to be escorted into jails with tickets to restaurants, while Black people show up demanding the right to cast a ballot and or abused, traumatized, and otherwise face physical forms of violence, right? And I say all of that to say the answer is yes, without equivocation. We can engender systems whereby people are much more thoughtful, not only about the messages that they consume, but by the actions that the individuals that we elect to lead for us take, and the accountability that should be met when people do or do not act in ways that are consistent with what they purport to care about and the positions that they assume responsibility for. And it requires a whole lot of work, but I again go back to these things exist because someone designed them to, and all of these institutions that we encounter on a daily basis work exactly as they're designed to. And so I do so much of the work that I do in part because I have an obligation in the West Wing context of understanding how government works, to not only share that information, but to try and compel people who share my moral values and who care about the communities that have conspired for my success to be much more engaged in the parts of the policymaking process where people who usually occupy those spaces exist because they have access to privilege. And their sole goal is to preserve and perpetuate that privilege. Disrupting that, for me, has been the way to try and accomplish the goal that you articulated, or at least asked if it was possible, Nick.
So good. I'm going to keep pushing. So MBJC's mission is to end racism, homophobia, and LGBTQ SGL bias and stigma. I think I want to ask you about SGL because I feel like that is something that you touched on just briefly a little bit ago. And I'd love to ask you just to talk about, for someone who might know, what is SGL?
Yep, I appreciate the question. And you picking up on the clue I left earlier. And so I want to be clear, because there are going to be some folks that are like, LGBTQ is already too many damn letters. What are you doing here? I don't care.
It's like,
right?
You use G twice. Like, come on.
I did. And we're going to add another one until we don't need to use any of them. We're going to keep adding so that there's space for everybody. And so I use same gender loving because gay is a political construct that has been designed and used over time to respond to the needs of white gay men. and people closer to them in proximity. If you think about the gay agenda, if you think about the ways in which gayness is celebrated, described in mass, very seldomly is my body, my physical being contemplated. That's one. Two, gay in its practical application colloquially triggers in people's minds thoughts of sex and deviancy.
Yeah.
And I just don't prefer to start conversations identifying myself in that way. I prefer to use same gender loving, a term that was created by a Black man that honors that I am as proud of being a descendant of Africa and a Black man in America as much as I am same gender loving. The term also centers the word love. Right? And I celebrate, my dog's name is Baldwin. There's a conversation that I play monthly, at least, between Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin when they were in Paris in the 60s, talking about the answers to the problems that we were facing at that time, many of which still exist.
Yeah.
And the answer that they both offer, accounting for the huge diversity of their lived experience up until that point, the ways that they show up in the world as a reporter and as a poet, the answer is love. And so I also choose to use a term that centers something that to me should be included in conversations whenever people are talking about our community, but are almost always not.
Wow.
When people are talking about Black gay folks, people will question how I have sex, how often I have sex, where I'm having sex. I seldom have people ask me, do I know love? Am I loved? What does love look like? And so I try and complicate, one, the assumption that all gay people are white and all Black people are not queer, LGBTQIA+, and to acknowledge the importance of words and being able to shift how people think about things and then move into having conversations about them.
Yeah.
Let me ask you on that though, because you said something that I think is freaking brilliant, and I want to just shout from rooftops the idea that you're going to keep adding letters until everyone's included. That is, yes. Learn my name. Do you mean like that? That's the basic concept. Do you? I just ask from a place of just somebody who just looks at what you're doing and is so in awe and admiring. Does it get tiring having to constantly? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And I want to be clear. I lead a civil rights organization. I don't lead a gay organization. The work that we do, it is in our name. It is the orders of the word matters. We are a civil rights organization. And we acknowledge that as long as there have been Black people, even before the terms LGBTQIA+ existed, we showed up in incredibly diverse ways. And in the lesson of Fannie Lou Hamer and so many others who remind us that unless and until all of us are free, none of us are free, I accept my responsibility as one of the race warriors who is equipped and able, right? I count it a privilege to be able to do this work. And while it's exhausting, I understand that it is incredibly important. And I cannot think of another more worthy expenditure of my time, talent, and treasures.
Yeah.
How do you... Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, this is like all up in like this is the meat of like where Nick and I were like, I wonder how do we like have this conversation, and you're like totally just in the center of it. So we like noticing National Black Justice Coalition, noticing that, and then saying, oh, the mission is to end racism, homophobia, and LGBTQ SGL bias and stigma. So can you, again, for someone who may not know, like, because we want to acknowledge like the weight of constantly or of having to fight for your own humanity, like for your own humanity to be recognized while you are living out that story. It's just like constantly feeling like you have to justify this thing. But I would love to hear from you in your body and the way that who you are, how you present, what the story that makes you. Why is it important to center, or how is it important to center LGBTQIA+ SGL lives at the center of a civil rights movement, particularly around race?
Yeah. I'm going to back into it. I'll start with the latter
Love
question, and then I'll answer the first one. It is impossible to have a conversation about the civil rights movement, about the movement for Black lives, which is the current moment we're in this much longer, protracted struggle for radically inclusive social justice for Black people in particular, without talking about and acknowledging the work and role of Black, queer, trans, non-binary people. Literally on the wall behind me is the architect of the March on Washington, Bayard Rustin, a Black gay man who was arrested at the time because there was a policy that deemed homosexual sex punishable by a fine and including a jail sentence. But the March on Washington that we every February during Black History Month pause to reflect upon in association with Dr. King's legacy would not have happened if it were not for Bayard Rustin. Bayard Rustin is also who introduced Dr. King and so many other leaders connected to the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and all of the work that happened at that time. He introduced them to pacifism and nonviolence as a form of protest, something he picked up from doing this work globally.
Wow.
Similarly, people often talk about the civil rights movement as a Black thing to the exclusion of the LGBTQIA plus movement. They assume that that's a white thing. There would not be an LGBTQIA plus movement or what's acknowledged as the origins of it, which is the Stonewall Rebellion, if it were not for Marsha P. Johnson, a Black trans woman who existed at a time when trans was not the word that was used. She and her friend in good, Sylvia Rivera, a Latinx trans woman, got together and resisted, again, a policy that existed in New York City that said it is legal to discriminate against people and not sell liquor to queer people because they can't hold it. Literally. And so this policy forced members of our community who didn't have the ability to overcome it because of their genetic code or their zip code to frequent places like Stonewall, where they could exist, but often under the threat of violence. And so what happened is that police officers would routinely shake down patrons at the Stonewall bar and other places. And at this point, Marsha and others were just like, no, we're just not doing it. This moment, these actions by Black people that were as much about individual self-preservation as it was collective self-interest are bricks in this wall toward ensuring that we all have access to the things that this country purports to care about. Freedom and equality, right? And so I hope that I'm making clear that it is by design that the conversations are often separated or segmented to the greatest extent possible. People love to reimagine LGBTQIA movement and a Stonewall without Marsha. It's not possible.
Yeah.
People love to tell the story of the March on Washington and try and erase the architect. We're not going to let it happen.
Yeah.
And in particular, in this moment where so many people have signed on in support of the Black Lives Matter movement, it should be lost on no one that the first person to tweet the term, to use it, was a Black same-gender loving man, a professor at UCLA by the name of Marcus Anthony Hunter. And then the people that contributed to it becoming known as a global movement are 3 Black women, 2 of whom identify as queer.
Yeah.
So many of the leaders of the organizations that have signed on to and make the movement for Black lives, which is separate and apart from BLM, are led by Black, trans, queer, intersex, non-binary folk. And whether or not we get the credit or have a 501c3 attached to the work that we do, we are forced into spaces where we are shifting policies. We are offering up language and causing people to change their practices such that we can all get free. And this isn't explicit or exclusive to us. So many people take for granted that there are often divots in most metropolitan spaces. If you have a sidewalk, there's often a divot that you can use to push something down. If you got on skates, it makes it easy for you to not have to jump. That's a result of individuals with disabilities who need physical changes to sidewalks so that they can access them. And most people don't know it. They take it for granted because they don't have to.
Yeah.
But if you were in a wheelchair or need an assistive device to literally navigate a street, whether or not that accommodation is made can be the difference between you literally being able to walk down the street. And so the point I'm trying to make, I hope, is that NBJC exists to honor that we will never have justice in this country as Black people until the least of us have it. And in this moment, if we apply the lens of intersectionality, a term that's been popularized by Kimberly Crenshaw because she introduced it into the academy connected to critical race theory, but that existed well before her. Patricia Hill Collins reminds us that intersectionality is a theory that has been applied by women in indigenous cultures for centuries.
Wow.
Applying that lens allows us to see that unless we fix policies so that Black trans women are not disproportionately murdered, or masculine of center folks are disproportionately incarcerated, then we will always be tinkering around the edges and none of us will actually be free. The first part of the question was about, I wrote down the term justify. I want to be clear. I do this work such that no one else feels that they have to do it. The reality is that who and how I love is and should be nobody's business. This work is important and I offer it up for public consumption because there are political, economic, and social consequences to the policies that exist at present and the barriers that have been erected over time, such that I don't have access to the same things that straight white men or straight Black men might have. I'm doing straight in air quotes. That's a whole nother podcast discussion. But I want to be clear. I don't need, and I'm not seeking anybody's approval. This is not about me justifying who God purposed for me to be and how I show up in the world. The work that we do, I think, is about three things. It's about truth telling. In the spirit of James Baldwin, I feel like I have a responsibility to tell the truth so much that it makes people uncomfortable. There are more than two genders. That is a fucking fact. Gender is assigned at birth. It is not natural. It is not biological. Those terms are socially constructed. Cis heteropatriarchy benefits people who are the closest to it. We can draw diagrams to make this shit clearer if we need to. That's one. The second is to hold people accountable. There are so many Black folks, and I want to be clear as the grandson of a Black Baptist preacher from Austin, Texas, James Lemuel, rest his soul. So many of us are religious and have connections to faith communities. It is hypocritical at a minimum to purport to be a person of faith or to care about Black people if you don't care about all of us. We can argue the scripture. And this, we can start with Leviticus and we're gonna go right past it after I make the contextually relevant points, right? But the Jesus I know is the one that showed up for the least of these, always for people that were castigated, relegated to the side, stigmatized. And we should be applying the lessons of love rather than ridicule that so many people rush to. And then the third thing is this: I fundamentally believe in the power of policy to create conditions within which people can be better. What I find is that often people try to do their very best, whether this is my own family members, friends, colleagues, people with whom I have vigorous policy debates. This does not include anybody associated with who shall not be named in the previous administration. But most people on most days show up trying to do their best. And there's sometimes, like in the state of Arkansas, for example, where people are showing up to inflict terror and harm by design and with intention. But most of the time, I find that if you introduce a term to someone and say, for example, don't use the term full-blown AIDS because it was created by the media to suggest that like HIV is something that like is bubbling up in somebody's body, like something on Ghostbusters, and it'll at some point ooze out onto others. It's designed to evoke a visceral response. And say to somebody, the technical term is stage 3 HIV, and explain to them how using the technical term can reduce stigma and make people feel human and valued. I find that when you do that, when you offer up something to someone, hopefully in the way that we do, that they will process it, And then at some point, it might invite them to shift both how they think about something and then how they talk about it. And so for me, the work isn't really about justification. It's about teaching. I'm an educator.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, yeah. I ain't got shit to say. I'm just sitting here.
So I want to push through because we kind of touched in on the church, especially the Black church, the Black community. I grew up in church. Nick grew up in church. David, did you grow up in church? Like, is that a big part of? Very much so. Yes. So we at
least 3 days a week, and I can't even sing, so it wasn't even a choir rehearsal.
Oh God. I'm having trauma. I'm having flashbacks right now. I don't like it. Let's get out of here.
Yes, and I'm comfortable speaking in public because of church.
Mm-hmm.
I am comfortable navigating institutions and politics because of church.
Yes. So let's talk about all of that. Let's talk about all of church. And let's talk about some of the things that we have been talking about, how do we make movements inclusive? How do we make sure that people are actually represented and I loved what you said about policies that create conditions for people to be better or to do their best, whatever. I'm not exactly sure how you phrased it, but it really
all
is.
of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Just how do we
mm-hmm.
give you the tools? Like, here's the information. And I think with a lot of things that we've seen the past year, masks, voting, like the pandemic, it's just like, if you give people the information without a lot attached to it, most people will choose something that makes somewhat sense. That's neither here nor there. So what I want to drop in the middle of this, Black church, LGBTQIA+, I want to throw Lil Nas. And this suggestion,
Montero, Lamont Hill, let's go.
This suggestion came directly from Iffy and another friend of the Chaos. Yes, and so we wanted to pull up some tweets, some things, and just talk about
receipts.
Yeah, the receipts. If you've ever wondered what freedom looks like, watch this video. And you talked about him being as the youth and the ideas and being able to listen to these voices and how they're expressing themselves. So I don't have a ton of direction. I just would love to. I had to Google all of this, today to be like, all right, let me make sure. What is up with the shoes? Like, what happened? But where are you at? Like, what was this for you?
Oh my God. I got chills looking at the tweets and am emotional. And I used to tell my kindergartners that real men cry. They also wear pink. And we were talking earlier about the exhaustion associated with the work. I'm able to do the work that I do because of the fuel that's provided by young folks like Montero, Lamont Hill, Lil Nas X, or Zaya Wade, who is like, if no one can understand and appreciate how much better she has made her parents as people, just to understand, like, let me back up. I know some of this is complicated because so many of us still don't have meaningful, intimate relationships. I didn't say romantic, I said intimate. Words matter. Intimate relationships with trans folk, with non-binary folk, with LGBTQIA+ folk, although in some ways that's more common or accessible. The trans and non-binary folk in particular. And that lack of relationship, the inability to do this, to have conversations with folks, to understand about their lived experience, hamstrings people in significant ways. And so it's really difficult for folks who don't know what it's like to be protected by and loved on by a Black trans woman, or cared for by a Black gay man, right? Or to have a non-binary person help you to appreciate social constructs that are designed to oppress when you might feel that they're designed to support you in some way. And if this is true for you, my hope is that you can palpably process the ways in which Dwayne Wade and Gabrielle Union as humans are evolving in real time as a demonstration of that baby's power. If you can't do that, then I don't know what the hell's wrong with you. Right? To say nothing about all of the good that she in and of herself is doing in the world. Right? I feel similarly about, and I'm a reality TV junkie, but I was also talking about Tammy Rivera's daughter. What's her name? Cynthia Bailey's daughter. Noelle is also same gender loving, right? So for me, I guess I want to make two more academic statements. There are more young people, right? There's a report that shows that students in high school are identifying more as anything other than strictly heterosexual than not. And there are so many people who are going to hear that and feel like, oh, there's that LGBTQ agenda working. To be clear, most high school students, based on data that they're reporting, are not engaging in sex in this regard. But they're clear that like the binaries, the boxes that we suggest that they need to force themselves within, that they're just not working for them. They're actually like, nah. Like, I don't even like this like boy-girl thing. Call me they and them. Or let's even go more progressive than that. Call me Z and them. Let's just come up with some. I've had young folks say my name works, right? Or call me beloved, right? Since we want to talk about the significance of naming and go back to reclaiming things based on transatlantic enslavement. Right. So that's one consideration. The second is that the young folks now, in ways that is not unique to them. Right. I think about my birthday twin, Congressman John Robert Lewis, and the responsibility that he assumed at such a young age. We often as adults like abdicate responsibility to fix a tough shit and like celebrate when the young people do it. Right. And there's some ways in which when they do it with such sophistication and aplomb that it is then our obligation to block and tackle for them. And so what I'm witnessing Montero do is to live without apology. It's to literally live without apology. First go round, and for me, this is not about his sexuality, although him naming his sexuality is significant for lots of reasons that we don't have to name. But the boy is brilliant. He's just a fucking genius. He had a song concept, used the internet to find a producer in another country, and engineered a product that he believed would play to the best parts of all the social media apps that he and his friends were using.
Wow.
Cue Old Town Road. There is not a school. I visited over 5,000 schools while working for the smartest person I've ever met in my life, Michelle Yvonne Robinson Obama, and her husband, Barack Hussein Obama. There's not a school that I visited where that song was not played. And then what he said at the time, I think he did it on National Coming Out Day. I also hate the term coming out. We can talk about that too if there's time. But on National Coming Out Day, he said, if you've actually been paying attention to what I'm doing, what I said, the artwork in my album, then you would know that I'm same gender loving or that I'm queer. It wasn't like he was hiding it.
Right.
It was that he was presenting himself and allowing the music to be consumed. And then he hit y'all niggas over the head with it. Fast forward, there are two things that I appreciate most about what he's done. He wrote this song and then named it using his government name to tell a story about a relationship that the world told him he shouldn't have. Right? For me, the one of the most uncomfortable parts of this, like, we don't support queer dynamics, is this suggestion that like there's an alternative. Like, the alternative for me not being myself is to not live. And it is why so many LGBTQ youths could die by suicide. Why so many Black youth who are not LGBTQIA plus die by suicide. The suicide rate for Black youth in particular has doubled in the last 2 decades.
Wow.
While it's decreased for every other group of children or youth. And so often the lack of wanting to adopt new language or hold space for these conversations literally means death for people who are simply just wanting to live. And he took the song and created a visual package that made so clear the hypocrisy in people using religion. I want to be clear, this is not about the institution of religion. It is about how people use it as a tool of oppression. And the execution of it was brilliant. The marketing around it was brilliant. The controversy associated with the shoes is brilliant. And it's still netting him money while they work this out in court until the point at which it's settled or dropped. And I celebrate him sharing the process of not only working through this in public and taking the risks that he's taken, but also celebrating the success. He dropped a video maybe 2-3 days ago. Days run together now, but as I understand it, it was a video he recorded to himself a year ago. So he remembered the space he was in.
Yeah.
And he was celebrating himself for arriving at the place he's now arrived at.
Yeah.
And in the same way that I had a birthday in February and I ended up writing a note to my younger self, my only hope is that, one, he has people around him who will block and tackle. As he continues to grow in his light, the attacks against him will continue to grow as well. So I hope that he has as many people around him who love him and care about his mental, physical, emotional, psychological well-being, and that he continues to be as selfish as possible in guarding and doing everything that gives him joy.
Mm.
Your presence on our Hi, Iffy. What's up, Iffy?
Popping in the chat.
I think I speak for all of us when I say your presence on this show has given us joy. You are nothing but, and you are truth. And there's so much just truth in what you say and things that people I know have already heard because you say them very loudly, and they need to continue to hear. So continue to say them loudly. And we like to close out our shows with a little thing from James Lipton. Our 10 questions. The James Lipton 10. Do we call him the James Lipton 10? I don't know what we call him at this point.
The Lipton 10.
Lipton 10. You know, it was a thing that was started on Inside the Actor Studio, and we just like to ask our guests these questions because we assume that everyone, whether they are actors or not, would have at some point been on that show and spread their truth and their knowledge. So with your permission, I would love to ask you these questions, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, let's go. Fun fact, I was a thespian in high school and in undergrad. Katori Hall, who is a dope showrunner, who is responsible for P-Valley and the Mountaintop and so many other things. I was in the first play she produced at Columbia University.
Ew, humble brag.
Humble brag. Just a little flex.
Just light.
Shout out to Katori and the whole team. They're doing amazing work. Uncle Clifford, keep going.
Yes.
I love it. All right. Well, here's yours. Here's your time with the James Lipton 10. So, David, what is your favorite word?
What is my favorite word? Freedom.
Mm-hmm. What is your least favorite word?
No.
I like that you smiled and laughed when you said it.
Because I'm a work minute yes dude.
What turns you on?
What turns me on? That's an interesting question because I'm like, where's my mind gonna go with that? The sound of laughter and joy, the smell of a nice scented candle or cologne, the feeling of having my hand held by somebody that I know who loves me, passing policies that result in the collective well-being of folk who look like me and come from the communities that continue to conspire for my success. Knowing that my people have the ability to simply be and to otherwise thrive are things that turn me on.
And what turns you off?
White supremacy, anti-Blackness, trans-misogynoir, oppressive systems that are designed to marginalize, stigmatize, and otherwise prevent all of us from being happy, healthy, and whole.
What sound or noise do you love?
Children laughing.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Anything associated with white supremacy, including the pundits that swim in that space and the bills that they pass, the ads that they air, all of it.
Yeah. What is your favorite curse word?
Oh, so I'm from Inglewood, and so it's not really a word; it's a phrase, but it's mark ass bitch. Like if you use a particular kind of person, if somebody calls you a mark ass bitch. Yeah, like it's. I just dated myself for anybody who knows the space. But if there's levels to it because you could be a mark ass buster, or you could be a mark ass bitch. And usually if you escalate to the last level, you're gonna say less and just fight. It's like on site. So mark ass bitch.
Oh, that's so good. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
You know, I often ask myself, especially in undergrad, if James Baldwin could have been like a self-serving attorney, or I guess now would be like a venture capitalist. Would he have been? And I think the answer is no. And so while there are definitely days where I think to myself, I don't get paid enough for this shit, I accept that the life I have is one where I am most often overwhelmingly fulfilled by the work that I get to do, that I wouldn't choose anything else.
What profession other than your own would you least like to attempt?
What profession other than my own would I least like to attempt? I'm not good with having to be at a designated place at a designated time every day, like routinely. So anything associated with like retail jobs or securing of facilities and things of that nature, I wouldn't do well at all.
And finally, if heaven is real, what would you like to hear God say when you enter the pearly gates?
Oh, heaven is real. And when I get to the pearly gates, it's going to be a couple of my cousins that's going to be like, welcome, nigga, let's go. And they're going to be playing Call Me By My Name.
I was like, heaven is real, hell is not.
And then we go wobble, right? And then somebody going to come through it. It's going to be a good time. No, heaven is definitely real.
There you go.
I accept and receive that. It's going to be a good time.
There you go. Yeah. Pleasure. Just a pleasure. Just a pleasure. That's all I got to say.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. I would love to have you back. I know Nick, I'm sure, would love to have you back. It would just be like, there's so much we didn't even get to tap into today. We scratched the surface of, but thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
My pleasure. I welcome the invitation, and there are also other members of my community, our community, that are doing brilliant work as well.
We want to know all of them.
Yes. I'll give you three now, just so for folks to think about. One is Ashley Marie Preston, who is an amazing Black trans woman who is doing incredible, life-changing work. She's accessible across all platforms. She has a particular adeptness at making political commentary. So I encourage people to follow and support her. Tony Michelle Williams leads an organization called SNAPCO, Solutions Not Punishment. They were born out of Georgia, Atlanta PD's abusive practices against Black trans folk. And they're doing a lot of work to provide housing and other necessary life-changing solutions for folks in Atlanta and throughout the country. And then Sage Dolan Sandrino is NBJC's inaugural Monica Roberts Fellow. Monica Roberts, for folks who don't know, is the Black trans griot. We lost her last year, unfortunately, but she was responsible for recording and reporting on the deaths of Black trans women, in part because so many of them are dead named and misgendered, that we are often not made aware of their deaths, and often the deaths go uninvestigated and unprosecuted. And so Sage is a young person who's doing a lot of work in the world. She runs a magazine called Teen Mag, has this campaign called Give Them Flowers, so that we celebrate trans and non-binary folks outside of simply acknowledging when there's death and trauma And they have access to lots of other folks that you should know and learn to support.
Amazing. Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll be back in what, 2 weeks?
We'll be back in 2 weeks. I want to tell everybody, subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/The Chaos Twins, and like us on Facebook, facebook.com/The Chaos Twins. We're on Instagram and Twitter as The Chaos Twins. There's a theme here. We're called The Chaos Twins. Our next episode is in 2 weeks. And we are so excited to join another friend of Iffy's, which was how we were linked up with David. And thank you so much for promoting the work. And we hope to connect with those 3 individuals and many more. So peace, everybody. Have a good one. We'll see y'all in 2 weeks.